In this video, we will remove the bobbin winder from this early model Singer 99 and then fully disassemble it. Let's get started. So to remove this whole assembly, what we want to do first is start with this screw right here. It's actually what mounts this bobbin winder assembly to the body of the machine. So the first thing that we want to do is remove this screw. Now, if you struggle getting your screwdriver into this screw head, if this is stopping you, you can loosen the screw here first, slide this little bracket up out of the way, and then that will help you get to this screw just a little bit easier. So I'm taking my screwdriver, getting good downward pressure on this, and I'm just turning it left to loosen. Once you loosen the screw all the way, you should be able to just lift this whole assembly off. Now that'll make it easier for you to slide your belt off too if you didn't get that off yet. So we can get the machine out of the way now. We're done with it for this video. We're going to take apart this bobbin winder. So you might not be able to get this screw out right now, but once we go ahead and get the bracket removed, which is towards the end, this screw will just come right off. So where are we going to start? Well, first let's look at the bobbin winder itself. There are several parts that it just helps to understand what they do. This part right here is called the stop latch. So when you're winding a bobbin and the bobbin winder is engaged, so the tire is running up against the hand wheel, this is called the stop latch or bobbin follower. And as the bobbin fills, because the bobbin's resting right here on this pin, as the bobbin fills with thread, it pushes against this stop latch a little bit at a time until suddenly it's full and it releases this tire away from the hand wheel. So that's why it's called a stop latch or bobbin follower, because it literally is following the bobbin as it fills. And it works like that. The next part we want to look at is what is called the thread guide or the cam follower. And the reason why I've heard it called both is this little cutout here, the thread runs through it onto the bobbin and it guides the thread left and right so your bobbin fills evenly. Some people will call it a cam follower because the way that it gets that motion of left to right is because it's following this funny shaped cam as the cam gear is spinning on this worm gear, and that's what makes it go left and right. So then finally, the other thing we should notice is this cam gear here. It has tiny little teeth on it that mesh with this worm gear here on the bobbin winder frame. And if it is set up correctly and the teeth are meshing with this worm gear correctly, as you turn the hand wheel and the bobbin is winding, these little teeth spin, and then that is what makes your thread go left to right, because now the cam is spinning as well. So first we will go ahead and remove this stop latch. And what we're going to do is start with this screw right here. And this screw is actually a hinge screw. So if you watch, I'm going to put my screwdriver right into this hinge screw and make sure that I have a little bit of pressure here and see if I can get it to loosen. Now I'm kind of just holding my finger right on the stop latch because underneath is a little spring. I don't want it popping at me. I don't know if it would, but so here we go. Here is the little hinge screw, and you can see with that hinge screw, that little shoulder right there, that's a hinge screw. Then our stop latch or bobbin follower just popped right off. That's what this looks like. Definitely needs to be cleaned. And then we should also have in here a little spring. You should be able to just kind of pull it out. And this spring is the same on both sides. There's actually a tail on both sides of this spring, so that means it can go in to this cutout here either way. So let's set them aside. Now we can go ahead and remove the thread guide or the cam follower. And the way that we're going to do that is we are going to remove this screw right here, which is also a hinge screw. So just get a nice grip. And it's left to loosen. And you will see here is my hinge screw. So just another hinge screw, longer shoulder than the first one we took out. And also in here is another spring. And it's a little bit different than the first spring that we took out, but it also has two little tails coming out. And if you look in this hole right here, you will see there are actually two little holes. And so when we put this spring back in, one of those tails is going to go in one of those holes. And you kind of choose, if these springs wear, I guess that you can kind of tighten the spring by choosing the hole that's further away. That's how I understand it. So we have the spring, the second hinge screw, and the thread guide or the cam follower. So the next part that we're going to take apart is the cam gear itself, and that's the one that's running up against this worm gear here on the bobbin winder frame, if you will. Now it's up to you. You can remove the actual cam if you want. So since I normally take everything fully apart, I am going to take the cam off. You don't have to. That's not an actual moving part as far as this cam that's laying on top of the cam gear. They don't move against each other. They move with each other. So for some reason when they made this a separate part, but you don't have to take it off if you don't want to. But of course, I'm going to. We'll take this screw out after we go ahead and get the actual cam gear off. So now we're looking at another screw, and this screw is actually an eccentric screw, and that is necessary to help us adjust how far together or apart the mesh is of the teeth on this little worm gear here. And I'm looking and I can see such a gap in between the teeth of the cam gear and the worm gear that I'm wondering if that isn't really the only problem with this, is that there needs to be an adjustment made so they're meshed just a little bit more together. But if we look on the back, we'll see there's a nut right here. And if we try to turn this screw without holding on to this nut, nothing's really going to happen. So you need either a pair of pliers or a wrench to grab a hold of this and hold it steady while you turn this eccentric screw. So it should be that a 9/32 wrench fits on this, but maybe it's just because I have this little cheap set. It doesn't want to fit. So I'm going to bump up one size. It's a little bit big, but it's still going to grab this for me. This is a 5/16. Somebody's measurements were off. So I'm just going to hold that wrench on the nut, flip this over, and there it goes. So now if I flip this over, I can just spin this nut off. And there is the nut for that eccentric screw. Now that you have the nut off, you can actually get that eccentric screw to turn. And this one is probably just gunked up. So now I can pull this away, and look, when you pull it away, right here is a friction washer, and it has a cupped shape to it. So, and when it goes back in, it's going to go cupped like this, so like an upside down bowl. But we'll put that aside, and let's look at this eccentric screw. It's pretty stuck in there, but there it is. And you know it's an eccentric screw because you have this first shoulder here and it has a funny shape. So you can see it sticks out further here and it's more flat here. That's how you know. And the way that we turn this before we tighten the nut is going to affect how the cam gear meshes up against the worm gear. So we'll clean this up before we put it back together. So if you wanted to, you could remove this cam, and it shouldn't be too hard because I can just put it flat, and then this just unscrews, and that's our last little screw. So you can see, I'll go ahead and clean all of that up, and then we can put it back together. So there is that. We'll keep those with the nut. So the next part that we want to remove is to actually get the arm itself, the actual frame, off of this portion of the bobbin winder. Then we can remove the bracket. So this is another hinge screw. It needs to be a hinge screw so this can rotate. And I'm just going to lay it flat. And then holding this nice and steady. Oh, that one was so simple. I'm just going to loosen this one. Nice big hinge screw. The shoulder's very big because this frame is so wide. Then I can pull this away. And under here, we have another spring, and it's different than all the other ones. And it locks into place like this on this little cutout. And so when we go to put it back together, we'll have to be mindful of that. But now it's okay for it to snap out of place. And we're just going to try to get it out without breaking it. And you just kind of want to gently wedge and tug, but you don't want to pull too hard because you don't want to bend the spring. There it comes. So here is the last spring. And I'll be interested to see how this one cleans up because it looks a little bent to me, but I bet it's going to clean up just fine. So that actually fit down here, and there's just one hole there. I don't know if you can see that, but there is a hole that this shorter finger is going to fit into. So we can set that aside with the bobbin winding arm. Now you can pop the tire off if you want. This I'm going to clean just like it is. I'm not going to disassemble it any further. This is pressed in and I'm not messing with that. But this is probably one part that I'll either wipe down with machine oil really well. I may even use a damp rag, and then I'm going to use a brush and get in here to really clean this worm gear up as nicely as I can so there's nothing at all left in these grooves. Then we'll flush it out with some oil in both of these oil ports and it will be good to go. Also, you're going to want to brush up and clean up all these parts here, here, and here. So last part, let's go ahead and remove this bracket. One last screw, and we're just going to put our screwdriver in, left to loosen. And remember, this part is adjustable and it's going to give some adjustment as far as how that arm, that whole bobbin winding arm fits up against the hand wheel when the tire makes contact with the hand wheel. That's off. Not a hinge screw, just a regular screw. And then see, our mounting screw just popped right out. So now all these parts are ready to clean, and this is actually a lot lighter than I thought it would be, probably because it is aluminum, but we've taken it apart. Now, if you want to, so you don't get the screws mixed up, you can bag all these pieces separately. If you're just using those inexpensive little sandwich bags, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sandwich bags, no big deal. Then you won't get confused on which hinge screw goes where. It's probably going to save yourself a little bit of headache. So that's it. That's how we remove and disassemble the bobbin winder on the early model 99. When we come back, we're going to take a good look inside the nose of this 99 and start taking some parts out here. So that's what we'll be doing next. I look forward to seeing you again really soon. Bye.